this unit is on statistics. So there's a whole course at our college for statistics, but we're just gonna get into it a little bit in this class. So we'll start with some vocabulary. I'll go through it kind of quickly. But statistics is the method for collecting, organizing, analyzing, and interpreting data, and drawing conclusions based on the data. Data is the information gathered by individuals. Descriptive statistics is the collecting, organizing, summarizing, and presenting of data. So that's primarily what we're going to focus on in this course. But if you enjoy statistics and you want more, then you would get into the inferential statistics, which is the process of making generalizations about and drawing conclusions from the data collected. A population is the entire group to be studied for a statistical study. A sample is a smaller, more manageable group that represents the population. An individual is a member of the population. They can be people or objects that are chosen for the study. A variable is a characteristic of the individuals in a statistical study. So it's called a variable because it varies from individual to individual. Like, for example, height or weight. Those are variables. Quantitative data is data that is numerical. So that's something that I definitely want you guys to pay attention to. It's also something that you can count or an amount. Generally, data that deals with numbers is quantitative, but there are a couple tricky ones, so be careful. Qualitative or categorical data is data that is non-numerical. So that could be like color or favorite movie. So we're going to decide in example 2 which ones are quantitative and qualitative. But before we get there, we have an example. A group of hotel owners in a large city decide to conduct a survey among citizens of the city to discover their opinions on casino gambling. What is the population for the study? So that's given in the problem. It says citizens of the city. So that's your population. One of the hotel owners suggests obtaining a sample of people by surveying all the people at 6 of the largest nightclubs on a Saturday night. Each person selected for the survey will be asked their opinions on casino gambling. Does this sound like a good idea? This would not be a good idea because that wouldn't be representative of all citizens of the city, or that wouldn't represent. It would be kind of like going into a store that sells cigarettes to survey the people going in on whether they think public smoking should be legal or not. So of course their opinions are going to be swayed, just like people in nightclubs probably have a different opinion about casinos than people who might be at home sleeping. Example 2, determine whether the variables would produce quantitative or qualitative data. So family size is an amount or something that can be counted. So that's going to be quantitative. Has that word quantity in it. Country of origin is qualitative. That's not something that we can count or an amount. Grams of sugar, again, would be quantitative. That's something that we can count or an amount. Income, also quantitative. Favorite color, not something that you can count or an amount, so that's qualitative. All right, so if you are going out to do a sample, there are different sampling techniques that would work to make sure that your sample is representative of the whole population. So one is simple random, and that's kind of like selecting names from a hat. Everybody puts their name in a hat and you blindly pull a name. So there's nobody that is getting picked over somebody else. Everybody has an equal chance. Systematic is a sample where every kth individual in the population is selected. So every kth could be like every 5th, every 3rd, every 20th, etc. So you're just systematically saying, all right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're in my sample, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're in my sample. Every whatever amount you choose, it's systematic. You're going to be consistent with that so that everybody has an equal chance of being selected. Now, cluster and stratified are the two most difficult ones to distinguish because in both of them, you're dividing the population into groups. So divide population into groups. With stratified, you're dividing the population into homogeneous groups, meaning groups that are the same, like maybe by, we used to say, gender, but I don't think that's fair because there's more than 2 genders. You could divide the population into gender, but not male and female. There'd be male, female, transgender, non-binary, etc. Anyway, the groups would be the same. So the difference is with cluster sampling, you are randomly selecting the whole cluster. Whereas stratified, you're still taking one or more random person or object from each strata, because the groups in stratified sample are called strata. So I'll highlight that here. They're still groups. So in cluster sampling, they're called clusters, and stratified sampling, they're called strata. I think it might be helpful to look at the example 3, where we have to identify the sampling method used in each scenario. In A, you want to investigate the voters' opinions of an upcoming issue for your city. The city you live in has 12 different neighborhoods. Okay, that's sounding like a group to me. You're splitting them up into groups, and they're non-homogeneous. Well, I wouldn't say that those are homogeneous, but maybe you just consider everybody who lives in the neighborhood the same. Anyway, you randomly select 10 registered voters from each neighborhood and contact them to ask for their opinions. So even though these aren't really what I would consider homogeneous, you're only picking 10 voters from each one. So that screams to me stratified. If it were cluster sampling, you would be randomly selecting the whole neighborhood. Part B, you work for a company as a quality control specialist. You want to check the current production of products for defects. You go down to the factory floor assembly lines and randomly choose every 15th item. So that is screaming systematic. Pretty straightforward there. C, a teacher wants to know how the students are doing in all the freshman math classes across the district. There are 15 high schools. Those sound like clusters to me. In the district, and they take a random sample of 9 high schools and sample all the freshmen. Yeah, so whenever you're sampling everybody in the cluster, it's cluster sampling. A group of friends can't decide what to do on a Friday night. They take all their ideas and write them down on a deck of cards. They shuffle the cards and then randomly pick 3 cards to decide what to do for the night. So this is just classic, simple random. And part 2, I'm going to make a new video for.